Good evening and welcome to Quorum. I'm Ron Brown. To serve and protect. The phrase neatly describes the basic responsibilities of our state's public safety network. And in Mississippi, the job of providing law and order begins at the legislature. That body not only writes our civil and criminal laws, it also provides financial support for the men and women who enforce state laws and maintain order across Mississippi. Public safety is our focus tonight. State lawmakers themselves are working hard on a wide range of initiatives linked to that very topic. The 2010 session is in its 6th week right now, and we have already seen progress on several measures, some of them controversial. House and Senate have agreed on a bill that would curb meth production in Mississippi. And there's progress on measures aimed at protecting our citizens against domestic violence, boosting all-terrain vehicle safety, and even giving bicyclists a break on our Mississippi roads. But legislators are still struggling with one public safety issue in particular, and that's budget shortfalls. On Friday, Governor Haley Barbour announced his latest cuts to state agencies and departments, and due to continued declines in revenue, the state's chief executive ordered cuts of almost 8.7% in most state agencies. Mississippi's Bureau of Narcotics has lost more than $1 million in 2010 appropriated funds. The Department of Public Safety itself has seen its administrative budget shrink by $347,000. And the Mississippi Highway Patrol will have to make do with almost $4.3 million less than it expected. District attorney offices across the state have also lost a large portion of its funding, more than $1.4 million. Those are big cuts for these critical state agencies. Will they be able to provide the services of law and order that we expect of them? Well, we put the question to Governor Barbour himself.
I don't think for the average citizen will notice any difference. For people that are in emergency situations, we're going to keep our foot on the accelerator and make sure that gets tended to. But there's no question that when you get to cuts close to 10%, then managers have to really work hard to be able to keep everything going like it ought to. And that's why I want them to have more flexibility to move things around so that they can make sure that their essential services are being performed in a way that's just as good as they've ever been performed.
We will get reaction from our quorum panel to that in just a moment, but back at the Capitol, House and Senate members are negotiating the details of the Budget Reconciliation Act. As passed by the Senate, the measure would draw $58 million from the Health Care Trust Fund. That's the money that Mississippi receives from tobacco companies after a key 1998 court settlement. Some of the money would go toward finance charges and court costs. The rest, $46 million, would help restore funds for several departments, including $1.4 million for DAs and over $765,000 for the Mississippi Highway Patrol. We questioned several lawmakers about the prospects of funding public safety and justice affairs in these lean times.
I think that we can absorb some of these cuts and minimize some of the hurt on some of these agencies. But I do believe that there ought to be some cuts. There ought to be some dip into the rainy day fund, and there ought to be some dip in the tobacco fund so that we can get through this year. I'm optimistic that if we can get through this year, we'll get through next year. I think we're coming out of the economy. Every sign's moving toward up on the economy, and I just think that we need to go slow on some of these cuts.
I have no doubt in my mind that that Mississippians will continue to see services provided at a level that they're accustomed to. We won't see Highway Patrol not be able to respond to accidents. We won't see Medicaid not be able to put people on the rolls. We won't see Department of Human Services turning out foster children and not taking care of our children and our people who can't take care of themselves. We won't see the Department of Mental Health turning anybody out on the streets from the institutions. And we won't see the Department of Health not inoculate people against diseases.
Well, what's going on so far is the governor has just pronounced that we should all cut back and that we need to tighten our belt and little catchphrases like that. And so far as they go, that sounds good. But what's getting ready to happen is the cuts are getting ready to hit the public schools. They're getting ready to hit the Department of Mental Health. They're getting ready to hit prosecutors. They're getting ready to hit core functions of state government that most folks just assume are going to operate no matter what. if these cuts go through, and if people realize the effect of those back home, the governor's not going to be as popular as I think he may be right at this minute.
We're taking on a month-by-month basis right now. We are in unprecedented times. Public safety is paramount. That is one thing that government is supposed to provide for, and that's going to be a focus. We have to change the way government does business in order for us to survive.
Well, it's my opinion that whatever budget constraints we'll be under for the next budget year, we have to think really hard and long whether or not we're going to move any dollars away from law enforcement. And I'm not just talking about policemen, boots on the streets, vehicles. I'm speaking about just the highway patrol, the local police departments, as well as our judicial branch, and that would include the district attorney's office.
We fund them at a very low level compared to other regions of our country. But of course, Mississippi is the poorest state in the union, so there are competing interests there, but they do a wonderful job with the resources they have, and we would love to give them more, but at present we're unable to without raising taxes.
Now, those last two lawmakers, Joey Fillingane and Ed Blackman, head up the Senate and House Judiciary A committees, respectively. We will hear more from them in the hour ahead, but first, we are bringing several law and order perspectives to our panel this evening. Marshall Fisher is the director of the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics. He has more than 30 years' experience in law enforcement. Willie March is the sheriff of Holmes County. He's also the president of the Mississippi Sheriff's Association. And we also have Matt Steffey. He's a professor at the Mississippi College School of Law and a well-cited analyst on legal affairs. And John Champion joins us by telephone from Hernando this evening. He's the district attorney for the 17th Circuit Court, serving DeSoto, Panola, Yalobusha, Tate, and Tallahatchie counties. And of course, we want you to join in the conversation as well. Our toll-free phone line is open. Dial 1-877-405-5247 with your questions for our guests. You can also email your questions to quorum@mpbonline.org. And you can join the discussion on Twitter. Just add the hashtag quorum to your comment and follow us at twitter.com/mpbonline. Well, gentlemen, first I want to get your views to these budget cuts that you're dealing with. Let's start with Marshall Fisher.
Well, we're not unlike everybody else in the state, government and county government, city here in this state. We're experiencing the cuts. We're all in the same boat. It's tough times. We've been told for quite a while, this administration has told us that we're going to be in tough times. We've cut, as you said earlier, about $1 million out of my budget for this year. We're still able to function with that. We're still able to make payroll, which is important for the men and women who work for me. They are still out there working on a daily basis. I don't think we've had any hiccups as far as state services that MBN provides on a day-to-day basis. I've said before in other forums, tough times bring out tough people, and it's time for it's easy to lead on the easy days. It's not so easy to lead on the tough days, and we're going to get through this. There's light at the other end of this tunnel, and this country, this state's been through these kind of things before.
Okay, and I also want to get the opinion of, on the telephone, John Champion. He's a district attorney for the 17th Circuit Court. When we're talking about budget cuts, we're talking about, for you, we're talking about furloughs. We're talking about maybe doing the same job, if not a more difficult job, with less people. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that is right. And I don't think it's less people. I think it's with all of our assistant DAs. The way it's been given to us by our association is that unless there is a restoration of our cuts, that beginning in May, and this was before the last $500,000 cut that occurred a couple of weeks ago, that our ADAs would only be able to work a total of 72 hours in the month of May, which is a week and 4 days, and only 40 hours, which is 1 week, during the month of June. So effectively, out of an 8-week span, our ADAs would only be able to work 2 weeks and 4 days, in which they would be paid. So, and the problem with us is that we don't have a diverse budget. Our budget strictly consists of salaries and benefits, and then reimbursement for travel to courthouses to prosecute. And our money for travel's been gone since December, so all of our travel right now is out of our own pockets. And so the only thing left to cut is salaries. And once we start losing people or furloughing people, the issue that really, really concerns us is who's going to come back. And that's a question that we don't know right now. I mean, I know that talking to other DAs across the state, it's of grave concern to us that we're going to lose assistant DAs because of these cuts, and we don't know who's going to come back. And if we start losing people, where's our recruitment pool going to come from?
And what does that mean realistically? Does that mean that you're talking about more plea bargains with less people?
Well, I mean, no. I mean, actually, I think, in my opinion, it means that we're not going to be able to have court. We're going to lose, because we're on the term system in Mississippi, and you only have in each county X number of court days in each county each year. And if we have to take these cuts and our assistants can't go to court in a county that's only got 3 or 4 weeks, and you're talking about a tremendous backload of cases, and then we start getting concerned about speedy trial issues. So, I mean, there are a lot of different things that we're going to have to look for, but I don't think any of us will change the way we do things as far as plea bargaining or trial work is concerned. It's just who's going to be there to do it.
Okay, thank you, John. And Matt Steffey, does this sound alarming to you in any way that we're talking about this evening?
Well, it is alarming. It may be inevitable, but I think at some level it is alarming, because there are a number of pressure points within the criminal justice system, and they include not only the fine work of law enforcement, but also processing cases through the court system. That requires court days, and court days are in short supply to begin with. That requires district attorneys and assistant district attorneys. It requires people to defend those cases. And if that can't be done at the same pace it's being done now, that raises speedy trial issues. That raises a backlog of people who may be held for pretrial incarceration. And it is literally like a traffic jam. That all of us know that when a lane closes, it causes effects behind that particular point, and that is what can happen in the criminal justice system too. Now, if these cuts are temporary, if they're restored quickly, if we don't lose the expertise of assistant district attorneys, then that impact will be less. But if they go on for a prolonged period of time, we do run the risk of losing the expertise of existing assistant district attorneys. That's going to make cases more difficult to prosecute as people get up to speed, and I do think it's of concern.
Okay, but as an experienced court or legislative watcher as yourself on these issues, is it time to start waving the red flag and saying this is maybe too much, or we're at the point where it's
I don't know if we've reached that moment yet, and a lot of that has to do, I think, with how long these cuts last, whether they're deeper, whether they stay in place longer. But I do think we should be concerned, because without prosecutors to prosecute cases, then we have people either who are out on bail, who ought to be prosecuted and sent to prison, or people who are in jail awaiting trial, who either need to be moved through the system or released. I think while there may not be pressure now to find alternative ways to resolve cases through plea bargaining or otherwise, that pressure will grow, I think, as court days become more scarce, both in terms of the courthouse being open and people being in there able to prosecute and defend cases.
Okay, Sheriff March, let's bring you into the discussion. Your office is not a state agency, but will county sheriffs also face problems because of the state's budget crisis?
Definitely would. All sheriff departments across the state would surely be hit. It's called a trickle-down effect. If you cut the DAs and the people back up in the jail, like the gentleman has said, these people sit there, some of them have medical issues. That's going to pull on the county budget. So it's definitely will hurt counties for this cut to go through or continue to go through. And judges set bond in some kind of very high. A person can't make the bond. And there's a backlog in jails. So we definitely need to look at how we incarcerate people then. We don't have the luxury to call the city or call the director of the Department of Drug Enforcement and say, don't bring anyone to Holmes County Jail because I can't afford to take care of this person. If he coming there sick need medical treatment, then the shared budget had to pick that up.
Mm-hmm. Well, few laws being debated right now will have the impact that House Bill 512 does. That's the bill that makes ephedrine and pseudoephedrine prescription-only drugs. Right now, it's a widely used cold and sinus medication, but it's also a building block for one of the most dangerous narcotics that we face today, methamphetamine. Senators voted overwhelmingly in favor of the House bill more than a week ago, and the governor is expected to sign the measure Thursday, despite intense lobbying against the measure by pharmaceutical companies. Like many states, Mississippi is facing a meth epidemic. Lawmen were here arrested almost 1,000 people last year on meth-related charges, and they seized about 600 production labs. The bill's passage will make Mississippi just the second state in the nation to require a prescription for pseudoephedrine. The measure does have its opponents, though. The editorial board of the newspaper Hattiesburg American wrote against HB 512. Quote, both the House and Senate have approved their own measures that would require a doctor's prescription to buy cold medicine containing pseudoephedrine, a key ingredient in meth, but have they really helped fight the meth scourge or just made it more difficult for those of us who are not drug abusers to get inexpensive care when we have a cold? But Clarion Ledger Perspectives editor Sid Salter praised the bill. He writes that the legislature's rather decisive vote represents a huge victory for state lawmen and a huge loss for drug companies and their lobbyists. Just as poor Mississippians got into the whiskey still business during hard times in the state's past, poor Mississippians are also making meth not simply for consumption themselves, but for retail opportunities as well. House Judiciary Aide Chairman Ed Blackman authored House Bill 512. He says the move should not be seen as a major sacrifice for Mississippi consumers.
Those people who really prefer that particular product can get it from their physician, either by prescription. In there, we identified more than 20 plus other products that address the symptoms or problems that people experience that would steer them towards pseudoephedrine to begin with. And I believe that when you weigh the benefit against the inconvenience, then the benefits far outweigh that.
Director Fisher, you were a key supporter of House Bill 512. Your thoughts?
Yes, I am. And I'll have to echo what Chairman Blackman said there. It's a controversial issue. I believe the benefits will outweigh the inconvenience. It's an inconvenient world. I was in D.C. on 9/11, and since 9/11 we've been inconvenienced. When you go to cash a check, you're inconvenienced if you got to pull your driver's license and some form of ID out. We didn't propose the legislation to inconvenience people. I can tell you, in the last year, the stats that we've produced from 2008, we went from 300 some odd labs to nearly 600 last year. This year already, we've had 81 meth labs in the state, and that's just the ones that we know about. We've already taken 20 children out of meth labs this year in the first 40 days. I believe we're 40 days into the year. Last year at this time, it was 70 labs and 9 children. So if we keep going, we're already talking 2 labs a day. There's a monumental cost when it comes to manpower, and we're talking about budget issues here that affects the whole criminal justice system from the top to the bottom, including corrections and probation and parole and judiciary and prosecution and those sort of things. But, you know, the public safety issue, the environmental issue, all those things aside, it's a self-inflicted drug epidemic here in the United States. We can't control the coca fields and the poppy fields in the Middle East, but this is something we know about. It was scheduled prior to 1976. There are a lot of alternatives out there, cold medication, and in fact, during the course of this, we've had several people that you would know if I'd mentioned to you, leaders and state leaders, that thought they were taking the product and realized when they looked in their medicine cabinets they were actually taking another product that didn't contain pseudoephedrine. So, and there was some confusing, misleading information out there by the big pharmaceutical companies who were lobbying against this because it's the bottom line, it's a profit share issue. But to me, it's a trade-off. The profit shares are human misery and suffering, and this is something we can do something about. We've seen drug courts, in my mind, are evidence that our prison systems aren't working and this is coming from an old policeman, our prison systems aren't working putting drug addicts in. We're creating a vicious cycle. Treatment, and I know people that were in on the drug courts right from the very first. They referred to them as hug a thug and things like that. Some of those people are true believers now in what drug courts can do.
Okay, you don't want to see any more hug-a-thugs around Mississippi then?
Well, no, I would have to say that I think, and you know, hug-a-thug may be a bad word. I was just referring to what someone else said to me as recently as last week. It's working. Obviously, it's working. And to lock somebody up and throw away the key because they're addicted to methamphetamine is not doing it. And this is, Chairman Blackman said it from the well of the House when they were debating this bill, that he has stood there for years, there and in committee rooms, talking about increasing penalties and those sort of things, but that's the first time he'd ever stood there and talked about a solution. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a solution to a problem.
Sheriff March, can you give us any examples in your county about the meth problem that's out there from someone who's on the front lines?
Well, yeah, I agree with what the director was saying, also what Mr. Blackman was saying. It's time to look at law enforcement a little different. The prevention. I think this law that had been passed, that the director pushed with other help for other law enforcement, it's the upfront. Let's stop it. Not locking people up. Like I said, it's just not working. But if you can prevent this, people from getting on this, then I think you can see a saving. Again, go back, when these people come to jail, if they're hooked on meth, they have medical problems, and it's expensive to the sheriff department or the county to treat these people. We had a hotel there in Holmes County, cooking up meth, burning the hotel down. Mm-hmm. You know, so I say it's a prevention, not only this drug, if we can do prevention on a lot of our cases that we had to do, it would save this state a tremendous amount of money.
Okay. And Matt Steffey, as I understand it, that House Bill 512 makes it essential for a doctor's prescription for any drug that contains pseudoephedrine, rather than just taking that medicine and putting it behind the counter to where you have to ask for it like some other states have. Where do you fall on the debate there?
Well, I'm very encouraged by what I've heard, because I think we have to address this both from a supply and demand perspective. If we can do anything to reduce the supply of methamphetamine on the streets, that's a good thing. Whether this will have that effect, we'll see. I hope it does. One of the things that having states in charge of the criminal justice system allows is for states to act as laboratories to in a good way, not like a meth lab, but rather a laboratory of democracy, of innovation, to see if this works. And if it works, I think it will be worth the costs. And there are costs. The poorer you are, the more difficult it is to get to a doctor and the like. But if we can do something to restrict the supply, that is a tremendous thing for the citizens of the state. And likewise, if we can do things to restrict the demand by getting not allowing people to get hooked on meth to begin with, or to get them off once they are. And it's not only the drug crime, the actual crime of making or selling or taking meth, but it's also associated property crimes to get the money to buy meth. Mm-hmm. And so there are tremendous savings in the prison system, in people's lives, in the lives of addicts, and the lives of people from whom they steal, and their families. And so if we can do things both on the supply and demand side, I think that's a tremendous benefit to the citizens. And I think this is worth a try, and I'm hopeful it'll work.
Are the neighboring states, are they also dealing with the meth problem the same way? Would it be easier just to go into Louisiana? Would it be easier to go into Alabama? Do you know?
Well, if you're saying it's hurting poor people, I don't think you'll find too many poor people leaving Jackson, Mississippi, driving to Louisiana or driving to Alabama, these places to get there. I really believe this law will surely cut down the meth labs in the state of Mississippi. And I think it would help our jails also.
Okay, we have a caller waiting patiently. James from Holmes County, what is your question for the panel?
Good afternoon, Ron and gentlemen. My question is that since the state of Mississippi is being shut out in all the parts, maybe I'm asking the wrong gentleman the question. It may be turn around transportation. Sheriff Marshall was one of my old students a long time ago. But anyhow, the question is, what about the toll bridges? The state of Louisiana have toll bridges. And we have over 3 or 4 million people every month that come through the Interstate 59 and 55. So my question is, Have the legislature considered polling these people coming in and out of our state on Interstate 55 and 59, or that's several that the state of Mississippi can do? I would like to get some input about, since the lottery did not pass by the poll rate. That's what I'm saying. That's my question.
Okay, James, I'm not sure that I heard the entire question. If you could repeat it one time for us. Oh, okay. He was asking about possibility of toll roads and of raising money. I would imagine going into the law enforcement fund.
Well, we're not advocating raising taxes on people. I think what we're doing now is changing some of these laws. I think that's going to be a big help to law enforcement, especially with this meth problem. I'd like to also look at ways to help control cocaine and marijuana, but I believe this would definitely help meth.
Okay. We have another caller on the line, Mary from Jackson. What is your question for the panel?
Hello.
Hi, Mary. You're on the air. What is your question for the panel?
Yes, I'm aware that there's a rainy day fund for the state of Mississippi, and I was wondering if there are a set of criteria for when that rainy day fund can be used, or if not, what is the process for deciding?
Matt Steffey, do you want to take that? Thank you for that question, Mary.
That is a very difficult question that comes up frequently whenever the state runs short of money. And that's I think that's something the legislature consistently struggles with. I don't think there's an easy answer about whether and to what extent one can or should use the rainy day fund. I don't know what the economic forecasts are 2 years out and 3 years out. I don't know if we've seen the bottom of our difficulties yet. And, I defer to people who have to sit there and vote on how we raise money. Nobody wants to raise taxes. The money has to come from somewhere to keep essential services alive, but I'm not sure I certainly have the right answer where it comes from.
Okay. Let me direct a question to Mr. Champion, who is our other guest who's not here with us, but who is also waiting on the telephone. Let me ask you if local and county governments are going to be able to support DAs with any additional funding.
I really don't think that they can. We ask so much of the counties now, and I'm going to give you an example of my office. It costs me around $250,000 to $300,000 a year and this is not the salaries and benefits of my ADA's investigator. This is staff, rent, all the normal bills that we have to pay, and the state of Mississippi only gives me $58,000 a year. And the balance of what we have to do has to come from our counties and our check funds and our intervention funds. And the bulk of what we get in now, simply because our check revenues continue to go down, is from the counties. And I just don't know how much more we can ask the counties to do. And quite frankly, not every county in this state can afford to do or to support the DA's offices, and I don't think that they should have to. So in answer to your question, no, I do not believe that the counties will be able to support what we're losing.
Okay. Well, maybe some new laws and some tickets would actually raise some money in one way. Cell phones and texting are points of debate at the Capitol this year. House Bill 973 awaits a full House debate, and that would prohibit the use of wireless telephones while driving without use of hands-free devices, and that would ban both phone calls and text messaging. Billy Hughes, the Senate President pro temp, had this to say about HB 973.
Last year we passed a bill prohibiting texting for teenagers while driving cars. But there are statistics that bear out that the wrecks and the accidents that occur for texting while driving aren't limited to kids. And it's probably very prudent because it is very distracting. And you wonder how much government intrusion you have in people's lives, and we would like to minimize that. When you start having people dying and getting injured, and there's a public cost to that, we have to consider those measures too.
Well, the idea of banning texting and just talking on the cell phone while driving, is that something that you'd like to see pass?
Well, that's something I'd like to see pass, but my thing is this law going to say sheriffs, policemen, or just who gonna be able to write these tickets? There's some law they say the sheriff can't run radar. There's also a sticker on the windshield. Only highway patrol can write those. So I don't know just what this bill gonna cover. Who will be responsible? Can all law enforcement write this?
From your experience, is it a problem in the county? Is it a problem? Are officers seeing this?
Well, most I see people that have them upside their head talking on them for texting.
You can't see that.
Yeah, can't really see it.
I see an awful lot of texting in my daily commute. I think this is a law that the only thing better than passing it this year would have been passing it last year. When we talk about privacy, our core concern of privacy is living our lives in our homes, making the decisions about our family, our professional lives, and the like, not about exactly what liberties you have driving on the car with thousands of other people. And there's no doubt that the research bears out that texting or being on the cell phone while driving is dangerous. Many of us are old enough to remember not being on the phone in the car. I think younger and younger people communicate so frequently by text that there's a very strong urge to do it while in the car. I think it's a tremendous idea.
Okay, how are you going to enforce that? How are you going to enforce a law that says you cannot text, or is that only after the fact, after an accident has occurred?
Well, like I said, I don't know. I haven't read the bill. I don't know just what's in this bill, but most people, you pull them over for a violation, surely they gonna get off that telephone. Now, will you be able to retrieve that telephone, go back in and pull up the texting without a court order? I just don't know what this bill going to cover.
Okay. Do you know how it works in other states, Matt?
Other states have taken a variety of approaches. What we do know is that it's dangerous. We do know that that kind of proof is available. That you can obtain whether somebody was received a text at that particular time or sent one or was on that phone. There is a resource question about how much and how effectively to prove that. But I think if you make the consequences of texting or being on the phone while driving significant enough, like with seatbelt laws and other issues, that maybe not tomorrow, but this is something that can change in the culture, and it's to all of our benefit.
Okay, we're going to switch gears here and go back to the methamphetamine question and the pseudoephedrine question. A question from our Twitter audience. It says doctors' offices are going to be flooded with cold and cough patients and little time to diagnose much larger issues. Now, how is that going to be fair? Marshall Fisher?
Well, I'm not sure that's going to happen. I mean, we can make all kind of predictions. I don't have a crystal ball. What I can point to is the state of Oregon, who scheduled it in 2006. Last year, the state of Oregon had 10 methamphetamine labs. 10. 7 of them were dump sites from somebody crossing an adjoining state line and dumping their waste. 3 were actual shake and bake labs where they tracked the pseudoephedrine back to purchases from another state where they smurfed them across state lines. There were a lot of potential horribles that were laid out there before they passed this legislation, such as the price of pseudoephedrine going up, doctors' visits doctors making more money. Doctors took a bad rap. Here in Mississippi, doctors were accused of they're going to make more money because of increased doctors' visits. It didn't prove to be true in Oregon. It hasn't happened in Oregon. As a matter of fact, the price of pseudoephedrine in California, where it's still sold over the counter behind pharmacies like it has been here for the last few years, is actually higher than it was in Oregon last year. There wasn't rioting in the streets, and like I said earlier, I believe a lot of people go just like I do. When I go to the drugstore to pick up something, I look on the shelf and see what's available, and generally I look at the generic brand because it's cheaper. And my wife's a nurse and has told me for years,
same
thing. So, and it generally is.
Okay, Marshall Fisher, the director of the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, is not swayed by the argument that it's going to overburden doctors for cold medication with this new bill. We have another call from Gabriel, who has a question from Hattiesburg for our panel. Gabriel, go ahead with your question.
Hey, this really isn't a question. It's just a comment. Out of everything that I've heard about pseudoephedrine on the news lately, nobody has said that people that have year-round allergies that take pseudoephedrine because it's the only thing that works, some of them might think that they're going to have to go to an allergist and that they would have to go back like every 3 months to get their prescription renewed. And it's not true. They only pay their allergist once. Whenever they get their prescriptions refilled, it's just a phone call from the allergist. So it's not something that's going to cost them, 4 or 5 times out of the year for the rest of their life. But if you do take pseudoephedrine because you have a cold, then every time that you get a cold, you're going to have to go to your doctor and pay your doctor every time. But another thing that I wanted to point out was someone said that there's like 20 different remedies that you can take for your allergies. And that's not true. Sure, you look at the over-the-counter products, and there's like 20 to choose from. But if you read the active ingredients, there's like 5. But I just wanted to point those 2 things out because some people might be really worried that it's going to really cost them a lot of money in the years to come, but it's not.
Gabriel from Hattiesburg, thank you very much for your phone call and your comments. And Marshall, what about people buying over the internet? Is that going to be possible to get these medications over the internet delivered to you through a pharmacy like Walgreens?
They'll still have to have a prescription. I mean, in this state, we had an internet pharmacy bill that was passed last session that requires a doctor visit for a prescription like you would normally do for a doctor. I take a prescription medication daily, and I go to see it's Nexium. I go to see the doctor. I usually go more than once a year because I'll have a physical or maybe I'll get a cold or a secondary infection as a result of allergy or something like that. But I have a prescription that I renew every so often, but it's I get it, it's a mail-in prescription, but I have an established doctor-patient relationship, and I realize there's poor people that might not have that, but I think the largest majority of people have an established doctor-patient relationship, and if they get sick in the middle of the night or on a weekend at an inconvenient time, my doctor knows when I call him that I'm allergic to penicillin. Mm-hmm. At times he might call a script in, and there's other times he'll say, "No, Marshall, I need to see you on this one." Mm-hmm. And like I said before, it is inconvenient, and I don't like the fact that it's inconvenient, but I've said before also that, people talk about government intrusion. Traffic lights technically are a government intrusion. They inconvenience you when you're trying to get to work and you run a little bit late, and I'm sorry for that. But at the same time, I go back to what I said before. Children. We're taking children out of these places, and it's not just the fact that they're exposed to dangerous chemicals. It's not just that. There's a significantly high incidence of abuse, including sexual abuse, with children of meth-addicted and meth-using, people on the street. And if that's the trade-off, I'm going to go with the children.
I couldn't agree more with that.
Absolutely, and parents who are addicted to meth are more likely to have children that have drug and alcohol problems. And I do think there are some costs, and I'm sorry for that too. The question is whether the costs are worth it. And it would be difficult to overstate what a scourge methamphetamine production and addiction is on all aspects of our society, from the schools to communities to crime and all the rest of it. And if this can make significant headway, I think that these costs are absolutely worth it.
Okay, we heard John Champion. You were saying that you couldn't agree more.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with the director. I know that a lot of the people that are probably against the bill really never have seen the effects of methamphetamine use. And what I'm talking about is when you go into these homes, and I go on search warrants from time to time, and I work closely with the Bureau of Narcotics and different sheriff's agencies, and when you go in and see these homes and you see what these children are exposed to, and just the tremendous danger, and supporting what the director said a minute ago, I can think of 3 cases right off the top of my head that we had an 18-month-old, and we've had other children that were sexually abused by meth parents. And it is a problem, and I know that there's a cost-benefit that has to be looked at, but the benefits to this bill tremendously outweigh the potential cost to it, simply because of the tremendous amount of meth use that we're seeing. It is absolutely, I've been here 17 years, and I can't tell you how much it's exploded over, say, the last 10 years. And the bill that was passed several years ago that required buying it over the counter through the pharmacy helped, but there are ways around everything. And with these prescriptions now, and I think when you really get down to it, I really believe the doctors will work with these patients as well to help.
Okay, that's John Champion on the phone, our fourth guest, the district attorney for the 17th Circuit Court. Well, one public safety issue that caught our attention this week is the use of radar for traffic control. Local police and state troopers can use it, but most county sheriff departments cannot. We counted no fewer than 6 bills that would have permitted county lawmen to operate speed-detecting radar systems, but almost all of them are dead this session, except for one limited to Jackson County. We asked Representative Blackman about the issue.
You have to view it from a historic perspective. There is no real logical reason for the separating of the different law enforcement agencies from one can have and one can't, except from a historical perspective, and that being that a view that historically it was the sheriff's offices around the state that did the speed traps, and therefore people ended up paying fines. It's no longer true that the sheriff's office gets a cut of the revenue generated, but it used to be true. And for some people, that has not been, we haven't been able totally to erase that from the minds of those legislators down here. And I think while that is not true, it is part of the perception that still lingers around the halls here.
Okay, Sheriff March, I imagine that you want to discuss this at length. Why can't you use radar, and would you like to?
Well, I would love to have radar in Holmes County. We have as many accidents on county roads you do on the main highway. And like you said, we've been tried every way to convince our senator representative to pass such a bill. We are actually in the money, give the money to mental health, give the money to anyone they want to give the money to. We just want it as a tool to do a good job in our counties. Now they let us, we carry guns, but we can't carry a radar gun. And we just don't see that the reason. Now we are elected. Surely we got to misroute that radar. Election time come around, they will remember you. So I think you got to do a right job, do a good job with it, and treat people right. I don't see that the legislature will have anything to worry about. And citizens call us about speeding on the county roads. And simply we can go out there and set a car out there, but people know that the sheriff's not running radar. They'll blow the horn at you. Matter of fact, they'll pass you up on that road.
They will really. They're that flagrant.
That's that bold, because that radar gun out there. On the highway, they come out there, they're looking for that highway patrolman. They may be doing a little speed, but they're looking for the patrolman, though, because that radar gun could be present. But on the county road, they know it's not present. As long as we ask the legislature to give us that tool, let's just try it then. Let's try it. If you think something's wrong with it, come back next year or whatever, and then take them back.
Mm-hmm. Matt Steffey, do you agree that the sheriff should have that authority? They should have that tool in their law enforcement tool belt?
I absolutely agree. It does seem to be just a historical relic, and we really do need county sheriffs and counties in general to be able to do their jobs, because there is tremendous financial pressure on counties in the criminal justice system, and that too is in a sense a historical relic. The prosecutions are brought in the name of the state of Mississippi, yet it's the counties that bear the costs of incarcerating people before trial, providing the medical care and the like. And I think to, on the one hand, give them all their responsibilities, but on the other hand, deprive them of some of the tools necessary makes very little sense.
Okay. You are watching Quorum on MPB television and mpbonline.org. We also want to thank our listeners on MPB Think Radio, and we hope that you will call in with your questions. The number 1-877-405-5247. As a matter of fact, we have a call on the line right now. Smith from Batesville has a question for the panel. Go ahead with your question.
Yes. My question concerns the shortfall of the monies and the funding for the district attorneys and their staff. It seems to be an issue of just ignoring the white elephant in the room, because this is an issue of priorities. It's about prioritizing what is most important, which is public safety. And without public safety, you can't have the law and order that is necessary to maintain all the other benefits that we derive from our democratic society, education, so on and so forth. So we've got to fund the district attorneys and their staff, or else everything else doesn't fall in place.
Okay, Smith from Batesville, no question there, but a comment. And John Champion, I assume that you're happy to hear that.
Oh, yes, very much so. You know, I just can't say enough that, and I agree that it needs to be prioritized, but I also fully understand, you know, the budget crisis. But when you look in the whole scheme of things, what we're asking for is, you know, when you talk about a multi-billion-dollar budget, you're not talking about just a tremendous amount of money. And as I told a news agency up here not too long ago, you know, we're put into office to protect our victims. And our victims have the right to go to court just like our defendants do. And if the victims can't get their day in court, that's just not fair. That's not the way our system was meant to be. It is defendant-oriented right now, and if our folks can't go to court to protect our victims, then it becomes an issue. And we need to be able to go to court to protect our victims as well as prosecute those who have committed these crimes.
Okay. Our fourth guest on the phone, John Champion, District Attorney for the 17th Circuit Court. Now, in most circles, it's well understood that driving a car under the influence is deadly and dangerous, and it has strong repercussions for those caught in violation. But right now, operating a boat under the influence, it does not carry the strong penalties. Senate Bill 2383 would change all that. We asked Senator Joey Fillingane, Chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Division A, for his input on this bill.
What we have done in our committee and on the Senate floor already this year is to change the BAC, the blood alcohol content, to match that of DUIs for BUIs. I don't live on the coast, but close enough, and we have plenty of lakes around the Hattiesburg area where boating under the influence, which under current law is still a 0.1 offense, whereas, as you know, driving under the influence is now 0.08. And we have gotten several complaints from Marine officers, patrols, and sheriffs in these different counties, especially ones like here in the metro area where the reservoir is a popular a spot for people in the summertime to go to, where it is very dangerous, and we want to make sure that those boaters enjoy their time on the water, but they do it in a safe manner that doesn't endanger themselves or the people around them.
All right, Senate Bill 2383 now awaits House action. Sheriff March, we await your reaction to this bill, and do you see a lot of instances of BUI, as they're calling it right now?
In a boat?
Yes.
We support the bill. A person out on the water drinking and drunk on the water driving a boat is dangerous, and we support this bill. We hope the bill do pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As it stands right now, if there's somebody that you know has been drinking and they've been operating a boat, there's nothing you can cite them with whatsoever?
That's right. Nothing to cite them with. So this will give us something to cite them with, because it's dangerous, and you get drowned or get hurt. The manpower you had to put out there to look for this person out on the water, there's no way I'll get any revenues back to the department to pay for any of this.
Mm-hmm. Matt, what's your take on this bill? Is it necessary for right now?
Well, I think it is, because while I agree it's critically important to get victims into court and to prosecute crimes, is even better if we can avoid victims to begin with. And it is dangerous to people out there with their kids out on the water. And we ask people to designate a driver in a car. It strikes me as very little to ask people to designate a driver in a boat. And these injuries can be horrific. They can happen to children. It endangers public safety, endangers the ability of sober people to enjoy their time out in the water with their families. I agree with the Sheriff.
What's the argument against it? I mean, does anybody have a good argument against? Does anybody heard a good argument against that you should be allowed to drink as much as you want while operating a boat at 40 miles an hour?
Some people say that the government intruding in their life. It's simpler. I don't know if that's a good alibi or not, but they want government out of their life. They should be able to have a good time. But then when something happens in their water, they want government to be involved. As a matter of fact, they want you to stay there all night long. even though the person may be deceased, they want you to stay there and look for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes me want to ask the question, why hasn't this happened before? Why don't we have this already?
Well, that's a good question. There's always multiple answers for legislative inaction. Bills don't get priorities. People organize against them. I suppose there might even be people who view it as less dangerous. That it's just simply less dangerous to be out drinking on a pontoon boat than it is in a car. But I don't know. I agree that this bill is overdue, and I hope it or something like it passes this legislative session.
We have another call before the end of the show. This is John from Byram who has a question for our panel. What is your question, John?
I bought some Sudafed from another state and brought it back to Mississippi without a prescription. Would that be illegal?
Okay, that's a good question. Marshall Fisher?
When the law goes into effect, technically if you cross a state line and buy Sudafed over the counter without a prescription and brought it back into Mississippi, yes, it would be illegal once the law goes into effect. However, as far as MBN is concerned, we don't conduct roadblocks for one thing. We're not going to be stopping people, and my agents have already been instructed, and we're going to have probably some huddles on it, so to speak, before it goes into effect. And we're not going to be picking on grandmothers or people that have a legitimate use. It's sort of like people call me because I've been in law enforcement for years, and they ask about, can I carry a handgun in my car? And can I usually tell people, most people that get arrested by the authorities for violations call attention to themselves. Now, certainly the people that we target, the drug manufacturers and distributors that are crossing state lines, they're going to have an issue. But if you have a valid reason, we're not, if you get stopped on a traffic stop by a highway patrolman or somebody, they're not going to be searching your vehicle for a package of pseudoephedrine.
So technically, yes, but realistically, if you're not buying in bulk and you don't draw attention to yourself.
Yes, sir. And I think probably maybe next session, we'll probably want to propose some sort of legislation to kind of tweak what we've done here to avoid that sort of thing happening maybe from somebody that's a little overzealous.
And I think for the law to be effective, it absolutely has to cover importation out of state without a prescription, or it would be the exception that swallowed the rule. I think in a lot of instances we have to trust law enforcement and DAs to use their prosecutorial discretion. And I think that, again, the benefits to be able to have an effective law that's going to keep shut down meth labs, that we have to put this in the hands of law enforcement, have trust in their judgment that they're not going to, toss your car for 4 Sudafed tablets you picked up on vacation.
Okay, we are just about out of time, but we have time for some closing thoughts about priorities for public safety this session, and we will go to John Champion first because he's been very patient on the telephone. Do you have any closing thoughts for us on priority for public safety, John?
Yeah, if I could add just something real fast on what was just talked about. I think we're hoping also with this bill that there will be a ripple effect to adjoining states, that if they see that it's working here, that they also will attempt to pass some kind of legislation to curb the pseudoephedrine purchases. Now, as far as the priorities are concerned, I go back, and I guess I'm being selfish in some form, but it's imperative, in our opinion, being the Prosecutors Association, that our funding be restored. We're here because we want to do our jobs, and we like our jobs. And if we can't do that, then the whole state's going to suffer, and the victims of crimes are going to suffer if we can't be there for them. And not only do we walk into court, but we're also advisors, and we get phone calls constantly from law enforcement to answer questions. And if the people aren't there, the ADAs aren't there to answer those questions, whether it be 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning, it's good. The whole state's going to suffer. So yes, priority-wise, I believe that the district attorneys absolutely need their funding restored.
Okay, and Sheriff Willie March?
I would have to support the DA. If the DA be cut, I can see that our jail is going to really be backed up with people waiting to go to court. So I think this is a pushing issue, and I hope that the governor or the legislator could see that will cause tremendous burden on counties, and also definitely will hit counties' budgets.
Okay, that has to be the final word. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's all the time we have for tonight. I'd like to thank our guests, Sheriff March, Director Fisher, Matt Steffey, and on the telephone, John Champion. And we also thank you for joining our discussion tonight. This edition of Quorum will soon be available for online viewing at mpbonline.org. Quorum returns next Wednesday at 7 o'clock with more coverage of Legislature 2010 and the state's budget crisis. I'm Ron Brown. Have a good night.